Owen Pratt was elbow-deep in a stalled engine on the shoulder of Route 9 when the SUV's driver, a tall man in a rumpled suit, finally stopped pacing and asked, for the third time, how bad it was. "Alternator's dead," Owen said, not looking up. "I can get you running again, but it'll take about 40 minutes. "I don't care what it costs," the man said. "I have a board call in 90 minutes I genuinely cannot miss." Owen kept working, steady, unhurried, the same careful attention he brought to every engine that rolled into his shop. In the back seat of his own truck, parked behind the SUV with its hazards blinking, his 6-year-old daughter Poppy sat with her booster seat and a coloring book, occasionally glancing up at the stranded stranger with open curiosity. She had no reason yet to look twice at his face. Not until he crouched down beside the guardrail 40 minutes later, waiting for Owen to finish, and the fading afternoon light caught his features at exactly the angle that made something in Poppy's memory snap sharply into place. "Daddy," she whispered, tugging his sleeve. "Is that the man from your photo?" Owen went very still, wrench frozen mid-turn. He had no idea yet how right she was. Remember the photo. It's been sitting in the same drawer for 6 years, and it's about to leave that drawer for the first time. If you believe the smallest, most forgotten kindnesses sometimes travel further than we ever expect, stay with me, because tonight proves it. Subscribe now so you don't miss where this goes. Owen was 38, a single father for 6 years, since his wife Renee died of complications during Poppy's birth. A devastating, sudden loss that had taken her within hours of the daughter she'd never gotten to properly meet. Owen had raised Poppy alone since that first impossible night, running a small auto repair shop by day and learning, slowly, painfully, how to braid hair and pack lunches and be enough for one small person who needed him completely. He kept exactly one photograph from that night in a drawer beside his bed, worn soft at the corners from years of occasional handling. It wasn't a photo of Renee, not directly. It was a photo a kind nurse had taken in the hospital corridor without Owen fully realizing it at the time, capturing him slumped against a waiting room wall in the worst hour of his life. And beside him, a stranger in hospital scrubs, a young resident who had sat with him for nearly 2 hours that night, saying almost nothing, simply staying, refusing to let Owen sit with that kind of grief entirely alone. Owen had never learned his name. The young resident had been paged away eventually, offered a brief, sincere condolence, and disappeared back into the chaos of the hospital, never to cross paths with Owen again. Owen kept the photo anyway, not fully understanding why, except that it was the only physical proof he had of one of the kindest hours anyone had ever given him. Remember that hour. It happened almost exactly 6 years ago tonight, though Owen has never once connected the date to anything beyond his own grief. "Poppy, sweetheart, that man's a stranger," Owen said quietly, though something in his own chest had gone tight, an old, unplaceable recognition stirring beneath the surface. "He looks just like him," Poppy insisted. "The man in your drawer photo. The one from the night I was born." Owen looked up properly now, really looked at the man pacing beside the guardrail, his sharp business suit rumpled from the roadside weight, his face drawn with the particular exhaustion of someone running on far too little sleep. Something about the set of his jaw, the specific way he pushed his hair back with one hand, tugged at a memory Owen hadn't let himself revisit in years. "Excuse me," Owen said slowly, setting down his wrench. "Did you ever work at Ridgeview Memorial? Years back." The man blinked, surprised by the question. "I did my residency there. Why?" 6 years ago," Owen said. "November, a bad night in the maternity ward. Did you ever sit with a father in the waiting room corridor? Didn't say much. Just stayed." The man's expression shifted slowly, memory working its way up through years of a career that had since carried him far from those hospital corridors. "I remember a night like that," he said quietly. "I remember I couldn't leave. I don't remember his name. I never asked. It didn't feel like the moment for it." "It was me," Owen said. "I never got yours either." His name was Griffin Hale, 39 now, CEO of a mid-sized medical technology firm he'd built after leaving clinical practice 8 years into his career. Driven out by burnout and a specific, quietly devastating string of nights he'd never fully spoken about to anyone, including the night he'd spent with a grieving stranger in a hospital corridor. Before we go any further, it's worth understanding why that particular night had stayed with Griffin as sharply as it had stayed with Owen. Because the reason explains more about who Griffin became than any resume ever could. Griffin had lost his own mother 2 years earlier during his second year of medical school, and something about sitting with Owen that November night, a man losing everything in the same building where Griffin had once lost someone too, had cracked something open in him that he'd never fully closed again. He left clinical medicine 18 months later, unable to keep absorbing that particular kind of grief shift after shift, and built his company instead around a specific driving mission, developing early detection technology for the exact kind of birth complications that had taken Renee's life that November night. He had never known Owen's name. He had never known whether the technology he'd spent 8 years building had ever reached anyone who needed it in time. He simply carried that hospital corridor with him into every board meeting, every product decision, every sleepless night spent pushing his engineers toward something faster, safer, better. None of that was information Owen had any way of knowing, standing on the shoulder of Route 9 with a dead alternator and a 6-year-old daughter tugging his sleeve. "You left medicine," Owen said slowly, piecing it together. "After that, 18 months later," Griffin said, "I couldn't keep doing it. I told myself it was burnout. I think honestly some part of it was that night specifically. I've thought about it more than you'd probably guess." "I never forgot it either," Owen said. "I kept a photo. A nurse took it without me realizing. You're in the background of it." Griffin's face changed completely. "I had no idea anyone photographed that." "Poppy recognized you from it," Owen said, glancing down at his daughter, who was watching the two men with the solemn attention of a child, aware something important was happening without fully understanding what. Griffin crouched down to her eye level. "Poppy, that's a beautiful name. Are you the little girl from that night?" Poppy nodded shyly. "I think I've thought about you more than you'll ever know," Griffin said quietly. "I built my entire company because of a night I spent with your dad. I just never knew if it actually mattered to anyone real." "It mattered," Owen said, his voice unsteady now. "That whole night, you were the only thing keeping me upright. I don't know if I've ever properly thanked anyone for anything the way I should have thanked you." "You don't owe me that," Griffin said. "I didn't do it for thanks. I just couldn't leave you alone in that hallway." "I know," Owen said. "That's exactly why I need to say it anyway." Owen finished the repair in silence after that, both men quietly absorbing the strangeness of the moment. Poppy climbing out of the truck to watch the engine come back to life with the same careful curiosity she brought to everything. When Griffin reached for his wallet afterward, Owen held up a hand. "No charge," he said. "Not for this one. Owen, this is a $200 repair at minimum." "I know exactly what it costs," Owen said. "I also know what that hallway cost you, staying an extra 2 hours on a shift you probably should have left hours earlier. Call it even. Actually, call it me finally owing you less than I did an hour ago." Griffin made his board call from the shoulder of Route 9, 12 minutes late, an unprecedented lapse for a man who had never once missed a deadline in 8 years of running his company. Nobody on the call ever knew why. He came back to Owen's shop 2 weeks later, not for a repair this time, but with a folder under his arm, technical specifications for the exact early detection monitoring system his company had spent 8 years developing. The kind designed specifically to catch the warning signs that had gone unnoticed the night Renee died. "I want to fund something," Griffin said, sitting across from Owen at the small shop's cluttered front desk. "A foundation, maybe, or a direct partnership with Ridgeview Memorial, making sure this technology actually reaches delivery rooms that need it, not just the hospitals that can already afford the newest equipment. I want to name part of it after Renee, if you'll let me. I never met her, but I think, in a strange way, she's the whole reason I built any of this." Owen sat with that for a long moment, Poppy's careful crayon drawings taped along the office wall behind him. 6 years of raising a daughter alone folded quietly into every corner of the small, cluttered space. "She would have liked that," he said finally. "She always said the best thing anyone could do with grief was turn it into something useful for somebody else. I think you've been doing that for 8 years without even realizing who you were doing it for." The Renee Pratt Early Detection Initiative launched the following spring, funding monitoring equipment for maternity wards across 12 underserved hospitals in its first year alone. Griffin visited Owen's shop regularly after that. An unlikely friendship built entirely on one forgotten hallway and a photograph neither of them had known the other kept. Poppy, now 7, kept a small copy of that same photograph pinned above her own bed. A nurse's candid shot of 2 exhausted, grieving strangers who had somehow, 6 years and 1 dead alternator later, found their way back to each other. A year later, Poppy stood in front of her class for a project about someone she admired. "There's a man named Griffin," she read from a piece of notebook paper, her voice small but steady. "He sat with my dad on the worst night of his life and never even told him his name." 6 years later, My dad fixed his car on the side of the road and didn't know it was the same person until I recognized his face from a photo my dad kept in a drawer. Now Griffin helps babies get born safer because of that night. I think that's the kind of kindness that keeps growing even when you forget you started it. Some kindness disappears into the ordinary chaos of a hospital hallway, unnamed, unclaimed, seemingly forgotten. And some of it, 6 years later, comes rolling to a stop on the side of a highway, waiting quietly for a 6-year-old's memory to finally close the distance. If this one reached you, tell us in the comments about someone who stayed with you during your hardest moment, even if you never learned their name. Welcome to Heartverse. We're glad you're here.